we're going to talk about state requirements. I just want to read 3 bullet points on the NC Division of Non-Public Education. First, offer instruction of at least similar quality, scope, and duration as local conventional schools. Maintain at least 5 hours of instruction with a student each school day, and then maintain a current daily log, journal, or lesson plan book throughout the entire school year, detailing time periods for each subject each day and information covered during the specific time period. So, generic question on that is, should we try our best to follow those guidelines?
So first of all, let's remember the rules, because regulations are what's important, because you should definitely follow the regulations versus the guidelines. Register by the time you're 7, and they have to be registered in a homeschool from 7 to 16 because of the mandatory education laws. And so you have to have a registered homeschool that your child is registered in. So you don't need to register before that. You have to have immunization records, or you have to have a statement as to why you didn't immunize, and you have to have that before anybody does an examination. If you do it after an examination, I mean, you can't write up, the reason I didn't do it is because, I have religious objections when you can't do that after the fact. You have to do that before the fact. Your school has to do tests at least once a year, but all the students don't need to be tested. The only students that have to be tested are those who are in 3rd grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade. But if you only have one child, you have to test them every year. But the requirements are only 3rd, 6th, and 9th that you're required. And so they do those, which is what the legislature has passed and said that you must do in North Carolina. But then they've also written these recommendations, and some people are tempted to do the one that I would disagree with strongly. Oh, you also have to keep an attendance record, and you have to attend basically the same number of days that public school attends. But the reason that I would say is, if you follow the same scope and sequence in homeschool, a lot of times you can get ahead really quickly. And if you're keeping their same scope and sequence, that means, you don't start 4th grade until 4th grade. Well, probably want to start 4th grade when they're done with the 3rd grade work, which they might still be in 1st grade when that happens. And the other thing is, you should design what you believe your children need to know and to understand, and not just say, well, this is what the state says they need to know and understand. Because the reality is, they have their objectives. Their scope and sequence includes a lot of things like racial justice. All the things that the NEA had, those are in the scope and sequence, and they're built around those things. If those things if you don't put the same priority on those things, and I put great priority on justice, but you get into some of these other things where you're talking about societal, that's not what people would normally consider to be just. And so we have to be careful not to just say we're going to adopt the public school because they say that is the right way to do it. What we do instead is make sure we obey the law, and then we do those things that are wise when they're wise. And the other thing with even the attendance, we did year-round school. We didn't do it in the same sequence that the public schools do it. And part of the reason that we did that is in public schools, they have, what do they call them? Field trips. They have field trips. They count that as a day of school. If you're going to a museum, that's a day of school. It doesn't matter if you do it on a Saturday. And so keeping a record of that, the detail of all that, I'm not sure you need to keep the detail. We didn't keep that level of detail. Do you have any?
I was showing somebody our schedule from, 2008. I don't remember what age the kids were. We talked about that. But she's like, that looks like a full day. And in our minds, it's hard to draw the lines between school and life, living. We wanted them to have a lifestyle of learning. And so they might be doing school from the time they get up till the time they go to bed. Right before they went to bed, we would do family devotions and read aloud. And the read alouds were history related. We would read biographies and things like that. So they did piano practice. They would do chores. They're learning life skills, and we consider that part of school, part of life. It's hard to draw those lines.
What do I need to do to inform the state/school board that I am homeschooling? How do I do this? sorry, I'll be reading it again. What do I need to do to inform the state or school board, and how do I do this?
There's a notice of intent form that you fill out, and you can find it online with the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education, ncdnpe.org, I think is the website.
It might be .nc.gov.
Okay, it might have changed since we did it a long time ago.
And of course, it's going to vary from state to state, but it should be, the information should be out there readily available.
In some states, you do need to do a lot more. In North Carolina, they don't have any choice. You file an intent, and you're not asking them for approval or anything else. They have no choice except to approve, as long as one of the two parents has at least a high school education or a high school diploma. And so it's much more just notifying the state that you are homeschooling.
So you mentioned about testing requirements, but what about grading in general? Do I have to turn in generic grades for different quizzes or assignments to a school board of any sort?
Not in North Carolina. And they suggest, or they want you to send your test scores in annually for the students that you're testing annually, but the law, to the best of my knowledge, says you just have to keep them on file for a year. And we would always recommend people keep them on file until they graduate, just in case there's any question. But I believe the law says you only need to keep them for a year. And then they call it an inspection by mail program, sending them in, which the law doesn't say you have to. A lot of homeschool leaders strongly recommend you do that, but you don't have to, according to the law.
I mean, one other thing with that is, with high school, you need to make a high school transcript to graduate them from high school. You get to make what the requirements are for that high school transcript, and you need to make up their grades as well. You decide what grade they deserve to get, because that's what teachers do, right? I mean, the public school doesn't have this brilliant thing where they go, oh, this is the perfect score. The teachers decide what they're going to grade people on. And so you have those grades, but for that stuff, you probably want to keep some more records in case when they go to school or anything, college, if they apply to college, that, just in case they want to check those kind of things.
And if you want record keeping of the content of the subjects you cover, that keeping a copy of the table of contents of a textbook that you're using is a good idea. We did have some subjects that we did testing, but we didn't do testing on all of them.
Okay, thank you. Have you or anyone that you know experienced a type of audit from the school board, and if so, what did that entail?
We never did.
We never heard of anybody getting one. The reality is that they have sometimes, do they ever do it with CPS? I don't know. There's cases where they could, but the reality is the Department of Non-Public Education has almost no staff in North Carolina, and because of that, they can't really do audits. There's way more homeschools than there are people that are working for the Department of Non-Public Education. They also have the responsibility for private schools, so they spend almost all their audit resources on private schools. They may do 1 or 2 token audits out of 2 million homeschoolers or whatever it is in North Carolina. Not 2 million, 600,000 probably.
Okay, thank you. What kind of testing do I have to do with the children?
A standardized test, and there's, I don't remember the exact subjects it has to cover. There's math, I think reading comprehension, and maybe spelling, grammar type information. Do you remember?
I think we did more than the basic requirements, so I don't know what is required.
We always use...
We did math, vocabulary, reading comprehension, spelling. But I don't know if all those are required.
We always use the California Achievement Test, and you can even do them online now. and they're about $25 or $30 a year per student.
And the other thing to remember is that you're not doing them. They basically, the state in their statute wants you to be aware of where your child is. And so they want you to be able to say, yes, I understand my child is weak in spelling. And so the purpose of the test is it meets the requirement, but even in thinking about meeting the requirement, all it should be is, do I really understand where my child is? And if you're engaged in your homeschool, the results from the CAT test should be, or any other achievement test, should be no surprise at all. You should be going, that's exactly what I expected. I know that he's struggling in math. I know that he's way ahead in reading, whatever. And those, so they should just be more of an affirmation that you're not missing anything. And that's really the only purpose that they have.
That's a good follow-up to that, Dan, from an earlier question is, what are some ways that you can
And so you talk about the medical requirements. Can you give details on what does North Carolina specifically require?
I don't remember what specific vaccines they require, but I mean, you can find that on the Department of Non-Public Education website. And like I said, you can do, in addition to actually getting the vaccines, you can also write a letter saying that for this religious reason, I didn't get the vaccines. And as long as you have that paper in your records, you don't need to get that vaccines. Really, the only health requirements, I believe, are vaccine-related.
Thank you. And can I have my child dual enrolled in public school? Maybe I want them to do math in public school. Maybe I want them to be involved in sports in public school. Is that an option for a child enrolled in a homeschool? Or even a private school, for that matter, involved in private school as opposed to public?
Yeah, there's kind of so there's a few parts to that question, if you will. And so one is dual enrollment. You can dual enroll in community colleges in North Carolina. And so they can take, I believe, until, is it 17 or 18, or until they graduate. There's some limit, but basically while they're in high school, they can go to take college courses for free at the community college. So you're probably better off in terms of dual enrollment, sending them to the community college. The other aspect of that is there are some private schools that will allow homeschoolers to participate in their sports programs, because that's obviously one of the hardest things, is if you really want your children to be involved in some team sport. But some of the private schools would do that, but that would really be up to their discretion. I don't know of any public school that will allow you to just go and take a math class or something like that. But with what's going on now, there's probably online stuff that will allow you, and I bet there's a bunch of online stuff that you can enroll if there was really a class that you wanted to have somebody else teach. Plus, the other area that's done is homeschool co-ops, where a bunch of families get together and people that are stronger in one area teach all the kids something, like especially Spanish and things like that, where the students aren't going to know, all the parents aren't going to know how to speak Spanish.
And in addition to that, the homeschool support groups have a lot of what we would consider extracurricular activities. Like, I know some students that participated in a band locally, like in Wake County. There's homeschool.
As well as sports teams.
There's sports teams. There's
teams,
homeschool proms, if you're interested in that kind of thing. There's
Field trips, especially for younger children.
Yeah, you can be part of a group for doing field trips.
Are there extracurricular activities for prom, band, things like that?
Yes. There's homeschool groups that do those kind of things, and I've done graduation ceremonies, and as homeschool groups typically do that to supply those things that people want in their homeschooling that you can't just do as individuals.
Or do you mean say it a different way? 10 years ago, there were groups like that, and homeschooling has grown in popularity and is continuing to grow in popularity. So, if there is not a group in your area, it would not surprise me if very shortly there were, just because homeschooling is increasing in popularity. But so there's a lot of
especially over the last 6 months.
Right. There was already a pretty good infrastructure in place, which makes it really easy to kind of roll up and do new things. So I mean, yes, it's a very accessible space.
And what sort of proof is required for my child to get a driver's license when they...
You have to have legally registered as a homeschool, and you have to legally say that they're attending the homeschool, and then
Driver's license?
to get a driver's license.
Okay, I didn't know. Okay.
Before the age of 18.
Okay.
After 18, anybody can get a driver's license, but to go to driver's ed, and you have to go to
Oh, to drive. Okay.
to
Go ahead.
driver's ed. Well, you have to now to get a
Right.
driver's license before the age of 18.
Right.
And so you have to be enrolled in school. So, legally they only have to be enrolled in school till they're 16, but you probably want to keep them enrolled in school if you want them to get a driver's license before they're 18.